On November 7, 1925, a maritime disaster took place in the English Channel, claiming the lives of a British submarine and 69 crew members. The submarine, 338 feet in length, was performing a maneuver to surface to periscope depth during exercises. It featured a unique design element, a turret with a 12-inch gun, borrowed from a formidable class battleship. The HMS M1 was considered the most heavily armed submarine of its time, designed specifically to destroy merchant vessels. The Swedish cargo ship Vidar was in the area of the exercises. A collision occurred which was barely felt on board the merchant vessel. The captain continued on his course, unaware of the incident with the underwater object. The impact struck the gun turret directly. The massive structure broke away from the hull, creating a breach in the bow. An intense rush of water led to the rapid flooding of the ship, which plunged to a depth of 240 feet. The wreckage was eventually discovered by researchers in 1999. The history of the artillery-armed M-class stems from the troubled operation of the preceding series, the K-class submarines. Among sailors, this project earned the unofficial nickname Calamity. The project envisioned creating large submarines equipped with steam power plants. The decision to use steam turbines on submarines was driven by a requirement to match the speed of the surface fleet and battleships, up to 21 knots. This concept was supported by the inspector of submarines, Commodore Roger Keyes, as well as Admirals John Jellicoe and David Beatty. However, Admiral Jackie Fisher, famous as the creator of the dreadnought fleet, criticized the project, calling the installation of steam engines on a submarine a technical error. Despite the objections, the K-class boats were built, but during service they proved to be difficult ships to handle with a number of design flaws. The internal bulkheads were rated for pressure corresponding to a depth of only 69 feet. If the hull was breached at a greater depth, the bulkheads could not withstand the pressure. The length of the hull created an additional problem. During a dive with a 30-degree trim, the bow could reach its depth limit while the stern remained on the surface. Of the planned series of 21 units, 17 ships were built, and their operation drew constant complaints. The technical failures with the K-class prompted the British Admiralty to develop a new design. Work on the M-series began in 1917. The order for the last 4 K-class hulls was canceled in favor of the new type. Steam turbines were abandoned and replaced with diesel engines. This improved maneuverability and cut the dive time down to 90 seconds, which was praised by the crews. The key design feature that distinguished this project from other submarines was the massive turret with a 12-inch gun located in the bow. These were reserve guns intended for the old formidable class battleships. Artillery systems like these could send shells weighing 850 pounds over significant distances. Weapons of such caliber had never before been installed on submarines, making the M-class the most heavily armed type of submarine in the world. The project was driven by the British Admiralty's desire to stay ahead of potential developments by the German fleet, which was already using 5.9-inch guns. The decision was made to create a ship that surpassed any possible enemy counterparts in firepower. Initially, the plan was to use the M-class for shelling coastal targets and attacking merchant ships. However, the idea of bombarding the coast was soon abandoned due to the insufficient effectiveness of a single gun against fortifications and the difficulty of aiming, which could only be done by turning the entire hull of the boat. The priority mission became hunting transport vessels. Mounting such a massive gun to take out cargo ships came down to the technical realities of the time. World War I torpedoes were a far cry from the more advanced weapons that came later. By 1917, they were still unstable and inaccurate. According to Commodore Sidney Hall, there were 0 successful torpedo strikes against moving warships beyond 1,000 yards. The effective range against a maneuvering target was less than 1,000 yards. Anything further, and your odds dropped drastically due to technical glitches. The torpedo diving too deep or detonating too early. On the other hand, slamming a 12-inch shell weighing nearly 900 pounds into the side of a merchant ship pretty much guaranteed its destruction. The whole concept relied on hitting the target with the very first shot, since reloading meant surfacing and took at least 3 minutes. If they missed, the submarine risked detection or had to fall back on those unreliable torpedoes. The M1 and M2 boats were fitted with 18-inch torpedo tubes while the M3 and M4 carried 21-inch versions, which required lengthening the hull by 10 feet. To make the most of this artillery, they developed a specific firing tactic known as the dipchick procedure. The method involved closing in on the target submerged using the periscope, followed by a partial surfacing. The sub would rise just enough to get the muzzle of the gun about 6 feet above the water. Immediately after firing, the boat would dive back down. Executed correctly, the maneuver left the submarine vulnerable for anywhere from 35 to 75 seconds. For submarines of that size, that was a remarkably fast attack speed. However, trials with the M1 revealed some significant problems. One major flaw was that they had no practical proof that a single 12-inch shell would actually sink a merchant ship. All their calculations were based on theoretical models. The inability to guarantee a kill with the first shot called the entire concept into question. Then there were technical issues with the gun itself. The breech was directly exposed to seawater, leading to constant leaks. Salt water got into the mechanism, corroding the parts, while gas pressure from firing damaged the muzzle. Every time they fired, the system needed a thorough inspection and repairs, making it labor-intensive and requiring constant maintenance. Despite its technical capabilities, the M1, completed in 1917 at the height of World War I, was never used against the enemy. The British Admiralty feared that news of this new weapon would prompt Germany to build their own versions with even larger guns, like 15 or 16 inchers. Because of this, the M1 spent the war in reserve, never showing what it could do in real combat. The M2 and M3 didn't enter service until after the war, in 1920, and the M4 was scrapped before it was even finished. Submarines equipped with heavy artillery were used for exercises, patrolling the waters around the British Isles and working out tactical maneuvers. The crews actually gave these ships high marks for their performance. It was noted that, unlike the K-class, the M-series boats handled better, were more predictable, and had reliable diving and surfacing systems. Sailors highlighted their fast diving speed, maneuverability, and the overall reliability of the design. However, the operational history of this class turned out differently than the designers imagined. The first loss happened with M1 in 1925 following a collision with the Swedish vessel Vidar. The boat sank to a depth of 240 feet, resulting in the death of 69 crew members. The collision itself was minor, and the captain of the merchant ship just kept going, never having registered a hard impact. After the loss of M1, the question arose as to what to do with the remaining ships in the series. The other two boats were fully combat ready and in good technical condition. However, the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 changed international standards for naval construction, imposing strict limits on ship armament, including submarines. Under the new rules, the caliber of guns on submarines couldn't exceed 8 inches, whereas M2 and M3 carried 12-inch guns, so the ships no longer met treaty standards. Considering the boats were practically new, handled well, and were equipped with modern diesel engines, scrapping them didn't make sense. The decision was made to repurpose M2 into an aircraft carrier. In 1925, the ship's modernization began. The main caliber turret was removed, and a watertight hangar for a seaplane was installed in its place. This engineering solution involved creating a structure capable of withstanding water pressure during a dive while allowing for quick opening on the surface. The hangar was designed to be spacious enough to house a light Parnell-Peto reconnaissance seaplane. The machine was stored disassembled. The procedure required the crew to assemble it after surfacing, lower it into the water, and retrieve it after the mission. This concept envisioned a stealthy approach to the coast, surfacing, launching aerial reconnaissance, and then the submarine slipping away unnoticed. Theoretically, this approach offered significant tactical advantages. However, practical implementation faced a number of difficulties. Assembly took considerable time, operations depended on weather conditions, and the team's actions required exceptional coordination. M2 conducted a series of tests where the plane successfully took off from the water and returned to the ship, while the crew practiced maintenance procedures. Technically, the system functioned, but operation was labor-intensive. The submarine was a unique experimental project. The ship's history ended on January 26, 1932, off the coast of Dorset, near Chesil Beach. During exercises involving the aircraft armament, while moving at periscope depth, a disaster occurred. According to the main theory, the hangar's watertight seal was compromised by the hatch being opened prematurely before fully surfacing. The intense inflow of water into the hull led to a rapid loss of buoyancy. The boat settled on the bottom and the entire crew was lost. An examination of the wreck by divers confirmed that the hangar door was open, pointing to personnel error or a failure of the locking mechanisms. The second M-class boat was lost as a result of an incident during a training run. That left the M3, the last representative of this series of submarines. Following the signing of the Washington Naval Treaty, her 12-inch gun was also removed. Given the technical difficulties and risks revealed during the operation of the M2, the idea of converting her into a seaplane carrier was abandoned. In 1927, the submarine was repurposed as an underwater mine layer. Equipment for storing and laying mines, including rail tracks, was installed where the gun turret used to be. The ship gained the ability to covertly lay minefields. From then on, the M3 served less as a combat unit and more as a test platform for developing weapon systems intended for the future Grampus-class submarines. The Admiralty used the experience gained to design serial mine layers. The submarine underwent a series of trials where procedures for laying minefields in various conditions were worked out and the reliability of onboard equipment was checked. The experience gained by the crew was later used to train sailors for the new submarines. After the tests were completed and the decision was made that the Grampus class was ready for mass production, further operation of the M3 was deemed unnecessary. In 1932, coinciding with the loss of the M2, the last representative of the M-class was decommissioned and scrapped at a British shipyard. Thus ended the service of the only submarine in the series to avoid fatal accidents. The M3 didn't sink, explode, or collide. She was written off and scrapped simply because she was obsolete. Of the 3 units built for this project, 2 were lost, resulting in the death of personnel. Both ships were lost not in combat, but due to technical errors and navigational incidents. The M1 was wrecked after colliding with a merchant vessel during exercises. The impact was so minor that the crew of the civilian ship, the Vidar, didn't even register it. The loss of the M2 happened because the hangar hatch was opened prematurely. The M3 was not involved in accidents, but at the end of her service life, she was sent to the scrapyard. In 1917, when the M1 entered service, the crew faced the challenge of mastering a massive artillery submarine. The ship's displacement was over 1,600 tons surfaced and nearly 2,000 tons submerged. Its significant size and hull length of 338 feet created difficulties when maneuvering in restricted waters. At the same time, operations showed design differences from the previous K-class. The diesel engines ran more stably and didn't cause the problems typical of steam plants. There was no need to wait for boilers to cool down before diving. There was no smoke to give away their position, and the risks of ventilation valve failures were minimized. The M1 submerged smoothly, reaching the target depth without the significant listing and trim issues typical of the previous project. The total dive time was 90 seconds. Crew coordination was crucial, especially when practicing with the main caliber gun. The procedure for firing during a brief surfacing required highly precise calculations. The commander observed through the periscope, choosing the moment to attack. Ballistic calculations were done manually, factoring in the target's speed and course, the range, and weather conditions. Any error in calculation meant missing the target, since reloading the gun with a shell weighing nearly 880 pounds was only possible while on the surface. On command, the surfacing maneuver would begin. The submarine's bow rose toward the surface, remaining partially submerged. The plainsman needed precise control to halt the ascent the moment the gun's muzzle was about 6 feet above the water. Go any higher, and they risked giving away their position. Come up too short, and water threatened to flood the barrel, likely causing the gun to burst when fired. Inside the turret, the crew opened the breech and checked the mechanisms. Aiming was done through a simple sight, all under a strict time limit. On the command to fire, the 12-inch gun let loose, sending a massive recoil and vibration shuddering through the hull. Immediately after, the crew scrambled for an emergency dive. The whole cycle, from surfacing to slipping back under, took 35 seconds if everything went right, and up to 75 seconds if they hit snags. Speed was critical to prevent the enemy from signaling for help or launching an anti-submarine counterattack. Crews drilled this maneuver constantly to keep their time on the surface to a minimum. Living conditions on the M-class boats were a step up from the standards of other submarines at the time. The hull offered enough internal volume to actually accommodate the crew comfortably. Using diesel engines eliminated the extreme heat typical of the steam-powered K-class, and the ventilation system was effective, maintaining decent air quality. Officers had their own cabins, while the enlisted men were housed in berthing areas that actually allowed for real rest. There was even a galley for cooking hot meals, which helped vary their diet. Still, operating the gun turret came with technical headaches. The breech mechanism was in constant contact with the harsh marine environment, leading to corrosion. After every mission, the components needed detailed cleaning and lubrication. Salt water wreaked havoc on the metal and precision gears, so maintaining the barrel locking system took a significant amount of time and constant effort from the crew. The gun barrel also suffered from intense wear and tear. The temperature clash between hot powder gases and the cold outside environment created thermal stress in the metal. This led to micro cracks and a gradual drop in firing accuracy. Regular inspections and replacement of worn parts were mandatory. Replacing the barrels was a complex logistical operation that could only be done in a dry dock. So while the boat's main caliber was a powerful weapon, it required complex and constant technical support. The torpedo armament on the M-class boats was seen more as a backup, just in case the artillery couldn't be used. The 18-inch torpedoes they used were more reliable than earlier models, but they still had their technical limits. They had a range of a few thousand yards at relatively low speeds, and guidance accuracy wasn't always stable. Servicing the torpedo tubes, including checking mechanisms, setting gyroscopes, and charging batteries, was another mandatory and labor-intensive part of the crew's duties. Preparing torpedoes for launch was a complex technical process that, for all the effort, didn't guarantee a hit. Notably, foreign naval forces decided not to copy the British M-class concept. Even though specialists from the US, France, Italy, and Japan studied this experiment closely, they declined to pursue similar projects. The design's technical limitations were obvious to the experts. A single large caliber gun with a long reload cycle offered only one chance to hit the target, making the cost of a miss critical. Using multiple smaller caliber guns was considered a more practical solution, allowing for corrected fire. On top of that, the massive gun turret placed a significant load on the hull and made the diving process difficult. The emergence of the M-class was driven by a desire to maintain a strategic advantage and by fears regarding the development of the German fleet's weaponry. In the competition for naval dominance, the British Admiralty made it their mission to stay ahead of potential adversaries. Their answer to German submarines being equipped with 5.9-inch guns was the development of subs armed with 12-inch weapons. The strategic concept was based on ensuring superior firepower. However, real-world operating conditions showed a divergence between theoretical calculations and practice. The M1 boat was practically never used in active combat operations for reasons of secrecy. A situation arose where the newest weapon was held in reserve specifically to avoid provoking the enemy into creating even more powerful counterparts. In the end, the gun designed to destroy large naval targets was never once used in a combat situation. All maneuvers and the development of specialized firing tactics remained strictly within the realm of training exercises. By the end of the First World War, the inefficiency of the underwater battleship concept became obvious, as design flaws outweighed tactical advantages. Major problems included the vulnerability of mechanisms to seawater, the need to surface for an attack, the inability to fire a quick follow-up shot, and the sheer bulk of the turret. At the same time, torpedo weaponry was being perfected. Reliability, range, and accuracy improved, and new guidance systems and enhanced warheads were introduced. Submarines equipped with multiple tubes gained the ability to launch salvos of 4 to 6 torpedoes, significantly increasing the probability of hitting a target. The Washington Treaty, which limited submarine gun caliber to 8 inches, effectively ended the history of artillery submarines of this type. Subsequently, the M2 was converted into a seaplane carrier, but this direction also faced serious operational difficulties. Despite the theoretical potential of using aviation for reconnaissance, a number of problems emerged in practice. lengthy takeoff preparation, dependence on weather conditions, and the ship's vulnerability while on the surface. The riskiness of the design was confirmed when the premature opening of the hangar led to the flooding of the boat and the loss of the crew. Using the M3 as a mine layer didn't lead to any major achievements either. The sub served as a test platform for Grampus-class systems, and after that, she was no longer needed. Having completed her mission, the ship was scrapped as obsolete. This was the only boat in the series that didn't crash with the loss of her crew. She ended her service being dismantled at a shipyard. The experience of operating the M-class was analyzed by naval experts from various countries. The history of these vessels demonstrated that increasing firepower doesn't always lead to effectiveness, since technically complex and highly specialized designs often prove to be overly vulnerable. Future submarine design took a different path, focusing on increased endurance, modernized torpedo weaponry, and quieter engines. The concept of using a submarine as an artillery platform went no further. Today, the wreck of the M1 lies in the English Channel at a depth of 240 feet, while the M2 rests off the coast of Dorset. Both ships went down with their crews. The M3 was completely broken up for scrap. With that, the story of this type of artillery submarine came to an end.